Some games just get re-released to death. Take GTA 5 for example. The original game came out on PS3 and Xbox 360 with a port for PS4 and Xbox One shortly after those came out. And now we're into the next generation of consoles, and the first thing they do is another port. But do you even know how often the first 3 Ace Attorney games got ported over the years? They started out on Game Boy Advance, got a port/remake on the DS, to then be ported to the Wii. That version got remade in full HD for PS4 and Xbox One, and that version then got ported to PC as a full 4K experience. Oh, and did I mention the 3DS, Switch, and mobile versions? Yeah, this game is probably the worst offense. Objection! Welcome to the Backlog project, where we play through a gigantic backlog of games and you get to choose which one will be covered next. Just head down to the description of the video to take part in our weekly poll and pick your favorite. Justice for All, the second game in the Ace Attorney series, picks up right where the first title left off. Phoenix has taken over the agency and is working on some cases here and there, with one of them happening right now. Well, technically it hasn't started yet, and Phoenix is just chilling in the courthouse having a psychedelic nightmare that gets interrupted by his phone ringing with an unknown number. Well, not his phone, but a phone he just happens to have on hand, and BAM! There goes the fire extinguisher over his head. Just like in the first game, our culprit is shown without any fuss to make the opening case a digestible tutorial for even the most literally challenged players. Without going too deep into the narrative here, I want to say that the story of this game doesn't reach the writing quality of the first game, and also fails to create more of the iconic moments and characters that its predecessor captured the player with. That's not to say it's bad. It's still a very enjoyable set of thoroughly entertaining mysteries, well, barring one, but it misses the mark on what made the original so special and memorable. And while it does have a few highlights I'll get to later in the video, there's one thing that ruins the storytelling in a lot of places: spirit channeling. What was an interesting, albeit never really explained plot point in the first game turns into a whole dilemma of easy go-tos for the writers whenever they wrote themselves into a corner. Most of the game's plot wouldn't work without this magical element, which in itself isn't much of a problem. It's an established system in the world of Ace Attorney, so it can very well be used to write interesting cases and plot twists, just that it isn't. Every time Phoenix gets into some unsolvable situation, either Maya or Pearl pulls out her spirit channeling at the exact moment it's needed and solves the issue. It takes away a lot from the tension the game tries to build when you know there's always that safety net, no matter how bad things get. Also, Pearl's spirit channeling Mia is problematic. I could talk about the visuals in a single sentence now, because they are exactly the same as the first game. Nothing changed. This game, more than a sequel, is an expansion in the same game. So instead of graphics, how about we talk about new character designs? They're actually really good. I like the characters from Case 2 a lot, with their unique style based on classic Japanese culture. Case 4 also has some really well-designed characters that fit into the existing cast perfectly, but still feel distinct from the first game's style. Same thing goes for the backgrounds, by the way. They made some really cool new areas that all feel like they're part of the established world without looking samey. For anybody wondering, we don't talk about Case 3 here. Nope. All I'll say is that I don't like clowns, so that case wasn't exactly easy on my eyes. At all. Much like the story, Justice for All's music falls short of the expectations I had from playing the first game. For whatever reason, they decided to switch composers and put Tanaka Naoto in charge of the sequel. Much to my dismay, as someone who heavily enjoys Sugimoto's style of making game music, I'm not one to judge a track based solely of its composer, but something just feels off with Ace Attorney 2. The tracks are fine, they just lack the magic Sugimoto's music gave to the series. Gone are the slick hammer-ons, the enigmatic synth progressions, and jammy bass lines. Justice for All's music sounds much more serious and epic, trying to replicate an almost orchestral sound on the limited GBA hardware. Yeah, we're reviewing the remaster, but the OST was still made for the GBA. It's hard to explain what changed, but if I had to say it in one sentence, it kinda looked like this. Where Sugimoto scored Ace Attorney to be a quirky anime game about prosecutors and courthouses, Tanaka's score displays the series as games about court proceedings that happen to have quirky characters. For what it's worth, the game remedies itself in Case 4, where Tanaka pulls out the big guns and actually found a unique style that carries throughout the case's themes, be it Shelly the Killer's laid-back cafe jazz music, Matt Ongart's bass-heavy superhero theme, or the epic revival track of one of the best characters from the first game. All of them are great, and if Tanaka had managed to transmit that style into the rest of the game, it would have made the overall impression much better than fine. You might have guessed this, but when I said the game is basically an expansion to the first, I didn't just mean the graphics. The general gameplay of Justice for All is pretty much exactly the same as in the prequel, but for those who might not have watched my video on that yet, I'll quickly summarize the gameplay. The link for that video should be popping up in the upper right corner now, and will also be at the end of the video, by the way. Oh, and while we're at it, give that like button a nudge if you will, it helps me a lot. Thanks. Ace Attorney is generally split into two gameplay portions, Investigation and Court. While in Court, the game behaves mostly like your average visual novel. You read the text from a linear story and don't really have a lot to do besides immersing yourself in the narrative. Sometimes, the game asks you to present evidence to support Phoenix's claims, or even cross-examine a witness by pressing them for more info, or unravel their lies by presenting even more evidence. One nifty little change is that you can now also present people as evidence, so you don't run into this evidence has to be used because it pertains to that person, but you wouldn't ever think about doing it in such a roundabout way in real life situation the first game found itself in quite as often. Another small but meaningful improvement is the HP bar, where in Ace Attorney 1 you had 5 exclamation marks of HP, with 1 being used whenever you messed up. You now have a variable bar. What's good about that? It adapts the damage to how heavy your current judicial fail was, making the system much fairer overall and less easy to die to. It also recharges a portion of the meter at set points in the story, so overall it allows for a lot more small mistakes and also looks nicer to boot. Investigations also didn't change much. You still go from place to place, talk to potential witnesses, and gather information by point and clicking your way through the different areas. Something I criticized in the first game was that the investigation sections were extremely low tension gameplay-wise, even for genre standards. There was literally no way to fail, and you just scoured everything randomly until you finally found everything you needed to move on to the next court day. Seems like the devs agreed with me on that being boring as fuck, so they decided to add a little spice in the sequel in the form of a usable item, the Magatama. What's that mumbo jumbo word I just threw out? Well, it's actually a historical Japanese ritual tool in real life, and that's also the function it serves in Justice for All. In Case 2, Phoenix gets gifted a Magatama by Pearl, Maya's niece and unfortunate sidekick in this game. This item allows Phoenix to see into the hearts of people and will show him when someone is keeping a secret from him in the form of mental locks. To open these locks, Phoenix has to, well, talk to the person. They don't actually know Phoenix has that power, so you're literally holding a normal conversation while our spike-haired protagonist hallucinates floating locks. In gameplay terms, this has you engage in a short but spicy battle of wits with your opponent, very much like a cross-examination, only that you can press for further info. While the idea and visualization is cool, and I appreciate them adding some stakes to the investigation portions by making these lock sections failable, they aren't really all that much fun in practice. Why is that? Because other than the linear court chapters, investigations are non-linear. So you will often start a lock section without actually having all the evidence you need to break it, so it turns into a constant game of trial and error, because more often than not, these sections are also cryptic as hell in what you actually need to present. I really hope they keep this feature in and refine it down the line. It has a lot of potential to make the games more engaging and less of a systematic search in every possible corner of the investigation chapters, but feels a little juvenile and not at all flashed out in this iteration. Just like when I reviewed the first game, we're already at a point where I don't have much to talk about anymore regarding the gameplay, so I'll take some time to talk about each of the 4 cases in detail, my own subjective thoughts included. That means if you have somehow found your way to this video without having played Ace Attorney 2, but still wanting to do so, this is your cue to skip to the verdict, because we'll be talking heavy spoilers here. I warned you. Don't blame me if you find out the killer in Act 4 was actually... Case 1. The Lost Turnabout starts like described earlier. Phoenix is napping and gets slammed with a fire extinguisher by our perpetrator, Richard Wellington. This causes Phoenix to have a sudden but severe case of amnesia. It's a bit cliche, but it helps set up a tutorial case for newcomers while also making sure it doesn't feel too off to explain the same basics from the first game to veterans. Anyways, both Maya and Maggie, Phoenix's client this time around, help him through the proceedings while making funny remarks about his disposition. The case itself is pretty alright for an introduction. Maggie's boyfriend, a police officer, is murdered by being pushed off a ledge in the local park while on a date. The reason why he's killed? Because he's in uniform. No, this is not a societal commentary on kakiophobia, but rather a simple misunderstanding turned murder, just like we love our Ace Attorney stories. See, our culprit lost his phone and Maggie picked it up. When he called the phone, they agreed on meeting in the park and her handing it back over to Richard, but when she showed up with a police officer, who was still in uniform because she picked up her boyfriend from work in tow, he panicked and decided to do what he had to do to get his phone back without questions. Of course, any normal human being wouldn't exactly expect the porn on his phone to get him arrested, but since Richard's a closet pedophile... Wait, what? He's not? Huh, I could have sworn... Alright, so he's a member of some scammer circle that tries to swindle people into giving them money, and the contacts of many of his friends are on that phone, so he panicked when he saw the officer. So how did he get found guilty then? Yeah, bananas. See, police bro loves baseball and yellow, so Maggie made him a very special birthday present, a baseball glove in a bright banana yellow, making the whole thing look like Donkey Kong invaded the writer's office. Now, because Richard's eyesight is very bad, he mistakes that glove for a stack of bananas, which means he couldn't figure out that his victim was left-handed and subsequently didn't think twice when he tried to fabricate the scene of the crime by writing Maggie's name. By writing Maggie's name with the victim's right hand. And the name is wrong to boot. Who the fuck spells that name M-A-G-G-A-Y? So yeah, that's case numero uno. Don't ask me what the writing team smoked to come up with this. I'd also love to know. Since the second case in the game has many implications for the rest of the game, I'll go into a bit more detail here, because you'll need to know or be reminded of many details that serve as world building. Look, we're out on a nice evening drive. Aw, shit. Yes, so this is Reunion and Turnabout, and it starts with a car crashing into the railing and some mysterious dialogue. Finally, not a murder case, but an accident. Turner Gray, a renowned surgeon and director of Gray Surgical Clinic, which was involved in a teeny tiny scandal a year prior. 14 patients died due to malpractice, and he blamed a nurse named Mimi Minnie who was in charge of the patients. However, media picked up on some bad rumors about the practice and accused Gray to be responsible because he overworked his staff to the point of being unable to do their job correctly. The fact that Mimi died a few days later in a car accident due to sleeping at the wheel didn't really help the case, and his clinic has been in dire straits ever since. Wait, car accident? Oh, it's all coming around in the first few minutes already. Neat. Anyways, Gray meets Phoenix not because of his juristic skills, but his connection to Maya Fey, who is apparently a lot more renowned in the world of spirit mediums than one would expect given her, well, being Maya. Our resident quack wants to meet her to perform a spirit channeling of the dead nurse and have her state that she was responsible for the malpractice to save his clinic from certain doom. The two men make their way over to Maya's hometown, which happens to be a little tucked away village heavily inspired by Japanese culture, in contrast to the heavily westernized game world. We meet some new characters like Pearl and her mom and Maya's aunt, Morgan Fay, who is strangely aggressive and has hair. Only Maya and Dr. Gray are allowed into the channeling chamber, so we all wait outside and... Man, Phoenix really can't catch a break, huh? Breaking open the locked door, we find Maya with a pistol in hand, muttering something in a daze, and Dr. Gray dead on the ground. Of course, with Lotta Hart now being a mainstay in the series, she's right there with us to snap some juicy pictures before we're being chased out by Maya's aunt to call the police. During the investigation, we also meet Inouji, a university student who claims to be here by chance while studying the occult culture of the Fae family. This is our first encounter with the lacking writing in this title. While the banana stuff in case 1 was mostly funny and fine for an intro case, I think the story of a mystery game should be consistent and at least somewhat logical, so Phoenix not recognizing the connection between Ini and Mimi until like 2/3 into the case is just baffling. She doesn't even try to hide her last name or anything, but nobody notices. Anyways, Pearls is now a somewhat permanent replacement for Maya, with her being locked up for murder. Again. By the way, she doesn't remember jack all except for a dream and a familiar smell due to the channeling. Convenient, huh? Also, I'm not super sold on the fact that Phoenix not only has little issue with taking Pearl on a field day of murder investigation that involves both her beloved cousin and mom, but the whole court also seems to be just dandy with the kid sitting there as his partner. Oh, we also meet our main antagonist of the overarching story, with Edgeworth having died, according to Phoenix. We kinda needed a new prosecutor to fill his shoes, and who better than Manfred von Karmer's daughter Franziska, who studied law in Germany and came over to get revenge on Phoenix for sullying the von Karmer name by defeating her daddy in case 1-4. Franziska is probably one of the weakest instances of writing in the entire game, and a large factor as to why I never really found myself looking forward to the court sections. She exists solely for the purpose stated in the beginning and never really shows any sort of interesting backstory or character development until very late into the very last case. She's a knockoff of her dad, but worse in pretty much every way. Also, the whip joke stops being funny like 3 minutes in, but the writer still thought it was necessary to use it 154 times throughout the game. I don't know what kind of fetish these guys were trying to whip into the players here, but it sure isn't working on me. Stuff happens over the next few days, and we find out a few interesting things. There's only a single key to the chamber, and Pearl found that in the incinerator along with some bloody cloth pieces. Maya's statement also sounds weird, as Mia, who gets channeled here and there to help out at the most opportune moments, says that a medium cannot dream while she is channeling. The spirit takes control of her body and consciousness. The game also finally officially addresses the fact that spirit channeling somehow makes the medium take on the whole appearance of the spirit, by Franziska showing a illegally taken photo of Maya doing a Mia channeling. Don't ask me how it all works, I don't know. Be happy the boobs are real, I guess. If you hadn't figured it out at this point, it's pretty obvious that Ini is the culprit in this case, with the biggest question being how she did it. That's where the game does something pretty smart and unprecedented in this series at that point. We've got an accomplice case, with her in charge of most of the proceedings in the Fae household, as well as being caught more than once by Phoenix while she's evil laughing and making fun of her sister, Maya's mom, who mysteriously disappeared some time back and left the clan in turmoil because she was supposed to be the next in line to lead it. Morgan is a pretty easy suspect in this. Turns out she's not exactly a complicated character and was going for the very thing it looks like from the beginning, eradicating the main bloodline of the Fae family, that's Maya's, and securing the family leadership for her daughter Pearl. It's a nice enough idea for a villain, but she could have just, I don't know, asked Maya, who had stated multiple times that she has no interest in taking up that position anyways. Remember, the world of Ace Attorney employs the death penalty on murder convicts, so if Maya gets a guilty verdict here, it's off with her head. Kinda shows how Morgan isn't really all that fine in the head after all. Much more interesting and well written is Inouji and her whole reason for getting involved in this case. See, Ini is in truth Mimi, but she's not out for revenge at all. When they had the car accident, it was Ini that died and Mimi was able to be rescued, albeit with her face being heavily disfigured by the fire. Since the only thing they found on her person was Ini's ID, the doctors reconstructed her face as that of her sister, and she never cleared up the misunderstanding. Living life as her boneheaded little sister held many advantages for her. After all, she would be able to leave her old life in which she was framed for malpractice behind and start anew, even if she had to fake her personality and interests in exchange. Her plan fell to pieces though when Dr. Gray approached her asking about channeling her dead sister Mimi for him to clear his name. Of course, that wouldn't really work, with Mimi not the person having died in the car crash, and it would surely out her for impersonating her sister, so she needed a solution fast. With Gray not budging on his plan, the only way she could think of was getting rid of him, and with her connections to the occult world through her sister, and Morgan being a batshit crazy hoe, this was a match made in heaven. Now, all in all, I like this case well enough. While the crime itself was very easy to figure out, I enjoyed the dynamics between the characters, and while not super hard to see, the twist that the sisters traded identities was hidden pretty well until right at the end of the case. What I didn't like though was the over-reliance on spirit channeling as a cop-out for unsolvable problems. The fact that channelers can't dream is an interesting fact and threw the case for a loop for quite a while, but the acquisition of that information could have been handled a lot better than having Mia show up. Like, they could have just had Pearl or Morgan drop that info during an investigation chapter and have it naturally been mentioned for the player to figure the mystery out. Speaking of Pearl, I'm very conflicted here. Like any man, I won't say no to a nice pair of anime boobs, but Maya, a rather petite woman, turning into her busty like a porn star sister and bending that rope to the absolute maximum capacity is already rather jarring. Now, they did it with Pearl, the 8-year-old kid. Can we just be real here? I feel nothing but weirdness and disgust, something I very rarely feel about sexualized anime content, by the way, when this happens. I don't like it, but at the same time, boobs. And Mia with Pearl's hair is just... nah, bro, nah. I did like that Phoenix used the channeling to prevent Pearls from seeing him get her mom convicted. Very smart use of the circumstances and definitely one of the best written scenes in the entire game. How do I best say this? Oh yeah, I got it. This case is the pits. Considered one of the worst cases in the entire series, and sure as hell the worst one in this game, Turnabout Big is infamous for how bad it is. But what makes it bad? Well, many people's criticism comes from the fact that it mostly centers around a love triangle between a 16-year-old girl, Regina, and her co-workers who are 21, 22, and 31 respectively, as well as a literal puppet. While the age gap is questionable and worth a glance, and the puppet thing is just plain dumb, I really can't give two shits about it. Let me explain why. The legal age of consent in Japan at the time this script was written was 13 years old. While this was raised in 2023 to 16 years, Regina is, for all intents and purposes, legal, and thus I don't really see a point in making a big fuss about it. Remember, just because it doesn't adhere to your own moral code or how things are handled in your country, that doesn't mean it's bad, wrong, or sick, as I've read many times during my research online in different forums. Maybe you're the sick one. Think about that for a second. Or maybe I am, because the age of consent in Germany is 14 and stuff like that seems totally normal to me. Who knows? It really doesn't matter anyways, because this case has way bigger problems than a fictional character's age. First of all, and this is a personal thing that I've mentioned earlier in the video, I don't like the circus. I don't find it enjoyable. I find it weird and often way too dangerous, and clowns creep me the fuck out. So every character in this case being some circus performer, as well as the character with the most screen time being a clown of all things, made this very much not fun for me. Mo the Clown is also very true to his character in that he just cannot stop telling dumb jokes, even when he's literally being cross-examined. When he does let his human side slip out, he's actually a pretty relatable and well-written character, but they just had to make him fucking annoying 80% of the time, for God knows what reason. Coulrophobia victims aside, this is also a problem for every normal player, because Ace Attorney characters are already plenty colorful and, dare I say, borderline annoying when they are based off more down-to-earth professions, but it just gets a tad bit too crazy with these circus people. Not one of the characters in this case did I really enjoy. Their writing is annoying in the best of cases and borderline moronic, looking at Regina and the puppet here, in the worst. Second problem, the crime in and of itself is just shit. Not only is the murder an absolute crapshoot that is barely even possible, they also included so many random occurrences into the plot that it's a miracle and a half that this somehow made it past the first drafting stage. If the timing or sequence of events would have been off by the tiniest amount, Mr. I got brain damage in addition to my disability here wouldn't have killed shit. Not to mention that he's probably the character with the weakest motive to ever have been written in a murder mystery, trying to kill the daughter of the person who literally saved your life because she, by utter and pure accident, caused your brother to be hospitalized? Jesus Christ, come on! All in all, this case is laughably bad from beginning to end, with barely anything good going for it besides the 15 seconds in the beginning where it plays a pretty damn cool music theme, the sneaky way of how the murder weapon was concealed, and this legendary quote. Here we are, ladies and gentlemen, the last case of the game. Farewell, my Turnabout. Considered by many fans to be among the best cases in the entire series, we've got everything and everyone here. Great music, an interesting setting with a complex but mostly cohesive and realistic crime, which is rare in this game, and some of the best characters new and returning in the series, yet starring totally not the same character archetype as Will Powers. Foreigner girl who somehow has more screen time than most of the main characters. Pretty secretary with a dark past you just want to get to smile. The coolest butler a hotel has ever seen. Actual Will Powers. An alien. Wait, what's that? I know that sprite from somewhere. Oh, fuck, get it away from me. Okay, yeah, maybe not everything about this case is perfect, but it's still great. Mainly for the fact that, for once, there are actual stakes in this case, other than just getting your client free. In fact, it throws the whole idea of an Ace Attorney episode on its head, because this time, Maya gets abducted and is threatened to be killed if our suspect and client Matt Ongard isn't acquitted. The kidnapper also states that Ongard did not kill anyone and is being framed, so everything seems dandy, right? Get the proper verdict for your innocent client and Maya will be fine. But this is where the writing gets smart. Your client isn't innocent. Throughout the case, more and more hints pop up that while Ongard didn't actually commit the murder, he did have a motive and hired a professional to get rid of our victim and his lifelong rival, Juan Corrida. Because of that, Phoenix is in a moral dilemma that is very similar to what happened in case 1-5 when he had to decide whether to unveil the truth and live with the consequences or keep his mouth shut but let evil have its way. Will Wright choose to save Maya, making him responsible for letting Ongard get off as well as taking the life of an innocent woman, or will he keep his integrity and humanity in exchange for the life of his partner and friend? This case is a well-written and paced story about not just a murder, but the circumstances surrounding it, as well as a deep dive into the past of some very interesting characters, bringing some much-needed grandeur to this otherwise unremarkable series of episodes. No matter how you look at it though, the case shares a few issues with the rest of the game that drag it down just a tad bit. The biggest one is definitely their usage of Mia and spirit channeling in general. Mia always appears when shit hits the fan and either gives Phoenix a hint or straight up tells him the answer, often defeating the point of a mystery story. While I did like the idea of using her as a spy to relay information between Phoenix and Maya, most of the time she appears in this case, and game in general, feel like easy cop-outs because the writers didn't know how to solve their mystery they themselves wrote. Another thing I disliked about this case is Francisca and her utterly random change of heart that was the key to saving Maya in the end. Look, I don't mind an antagonist switching sides after they have been given some exposure to the protagonist's side and have some breathing room in the story, but Francisca is just crap. She wasn't very interesting, funny, or rememberable in the other episodes, and it feels like the writers noticed that, so they made her have a big redeeming moment, but forgot that something like that hits like a wet sponge when you can't be asked to properly characterize her before that point. Lastly, they also missed the shot on Mr. Shelly the Killer, one of the most promising characters in the series so far. He supposedly has a very strict code he adheres to, and that fact is even neatly used in how the case gets solved in the end. So why the hell doesn't he adhere to it the 20 times before where he seems to be just talking crap? The amount of time he threatens to do something, proceeding to be ignored and then just rolling along without any of the threatened consequences is astonishing and took a lot of the urgency out of this final stretch of the case. It never felt like Maya was really in any danger. Also, they could have done a better job of not letting the player in on the butler being the killer like 5 minutes into the whole case. It feels weird seeing Phoenix and his friends fumble around while you, as the player, know exactly what needs to be done but being unable to do it because the writing thinks it's way smarter than it actually is. Phoenix Wright, Ace Attorney, Justice for All makes for a compelling case. Same game, but new characters, stories, crimes, and music. On its own, it can hold true to that and offers players more of what they loved in the first game. Unfortunately, it seems that Justice for All doesn't include doing justice to its predecessor. Not only does it fail to improve upon the problems that Ace Attorney 1 had, it also introduces new headaches and often doesn't manage to capture the charm and unique feeling that made the first game so special. While some things show promise, like the Magatama and some, if not all, of the new music and character designs, overall, this second entry in the series is inferior in almost every way to what made Ace Attorney into such a gem in the first place. That doesn't mean you should not play it though. Everything in this game is still far from bad, sans the clown, and you could do much worse than spending some more time with Phoenix Wright and the colorful cast of characters. Just because one gem shines brighter than another doesn't mean that both cannot be brilliant in their own right. When we completed Phoenix Wright, Ace Attorney, Justice for All, we had 4 episodes completed, 45 cross-examinations held, 3 game overs, 2 of which caused by the Magatama, 12 psych locks unlocked, way too much time spent jamming to Matt Onguard's theme. Hope you enjoyed the video. Remember to vote on the next game I should review in the channel's community tab in the description of this video. Do the usual YouTube algorithm stuff so I can keep making these videos. Thank you for watching, and remember to always keep that backlog rolling.